My sister took my vacation photos and posted them as her own. Last month, I went on a solo trip to the mountains and captured some amazing photos of the scenery. I was really proud of the shots I got and planned to post them on my social media after editing them. When I got back home, I shared a few of the best photos with my family group chat, and my sister, Emma, asked if she could see the rest. I didn't think anything of it and sent them over. A few days later, I logged into Instagram and was shocked to see that Emma had posted nearly all of my photos on her page, claiming them as her own. She had even written captions about her peaceful solo getaway, leaving no mention that the photos weren't hers. Her followers were commenting on how great she was at photography, and she just went along with it. I immediately confronted her, asking why she didn't credit me or at least ask before posting them. She brushed it off, saying, "It's just Instagram, no one cares." I was livid. Those photos meant a lot to me, and seeing her take credit felt like a huge betrayal. Now, every time I look at her profile, I can't help but feel annoyed. She still hasn't taken the post down, and it's made things tense between us. My brother rented out my room while I was away. A couple of months ago, I left for a 3-week business trip. Before I left, I asked my brother Eric to keep an eye on my apartment. Everything seemed fine until I came back and noticed something strange. My bed was made with different sheets, and there were toiletries in the bathroom that weren't mine. When I confronted Eric, he admitted that he had rented out my room on an online platform while I was away. He said he saw it as easy money, since I wasn't using the space, and assured me he cleaned everything up before I got back. I was furious. He had let a complete stranger stay in my home without asking for permission, and I felt completely violated. To make matters worse, Eric hadn't even changed the locks after the guest left, and I found out later that the person had stayed for over 2 weeks. When I asked him why he didn't tell me, he just shrugged and said he didn't think I'd mind, since it didn't hurt anything. I immediately changed the locks and told him he was no longer allowed to stay at my place unsupervised. Eric apologized, but the damage was done. Now, I'm left feeling uneasy in my own home, wondering if I can trust him again. My neighbor hosted a party in my backyard without permission. Last Saturday, I woke up to loud music blasting from my backyard. Confused, I looked out the window and saw a group of people setting up tables and chairs, turning my backyard into an impromptu party venue. I rushed outside and found my neighbor, Carl, casually directing everything. When I asked what was going on, he smiled and said he figured I wouldn't mind him borrowing my yard for his daughter's birthday party since I wasn't using it. I was furious. Carl hadn't even asked. He claimed it was too late to change anything since the guests were already on their way. I felt trapped, with kids running around and decorations already set up. I told him I wasn't happy about it, but he just waved me off, saying it would be over by the evening. The party went on for hours, with kids trampling over my flower beds and guests spilling drinks on my patio furniture. By the time it ended, my yard was a mess. Carl barely apologized, saying the kids probably didn't mean any harm, and that he'd help clean up later. I spent the next day cleaning up on my own, and Carl never showed up to help. Now, I'm left with a damaged yard and a neighbor who clearly has no respect for boundaries. We haven't spoken since, and I've decided to put up a fence. My cousin used my credit card to buy himself a gift. A few weeks ago, my cousin Tom came to visit. We've always been close, so I didn't think twice about leaving my wallet out while he stayed at my place for a few days. One afternoon, while I was at work, Tom texted me saying he found the perfect pair of shoes online and needed to buy them before they sold out. He asked if he could use my card just this once because his had maxed out. I didn't reply immediately, but before I had the chance, he went ahead and used my card. When I got home, he told me he'd already placed the order, casually thanking me as if it wasn't a big deal. I was shocked. He hadn't waited for my permission, and now I had a charge on my card that I didn't agree to. Tom promised he'd pay me back, saying it was just a temporary thing. But days went by and no money appeared. When I confronted him, Tom brushed it off, claiming he'd get the money to me soon. Meanwhile, the shoes arrived at my apartment and he didn't even bother to return them. I ended up having to change my card details and lock away my finances. Tom hasn't mentioned paying me back since, and I've started keeping my distance. I've learned not to be so trusting, especially with family. My neighbor used my Wi-Fi without asking and racked up a huge bill. A few months ago, I noticed my internet was running slower than usual. At first, I thought it was just a temporary issue, but then I started getting notifications from my provider about exceeding my data limit. This had never happened before, so I called customer service to find out what was going on. They told me that someone was using a massive amount of data on my network. Confused, I checked my router settings and discovered an unfamiliar device connected to my Wi-Fi. It didn't take long to figure out it was my neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, who had somehow gotten hold of my password. When I confronted him, he admitted he'd been using my Wi-Fi for months to stream movies and download large files. He said he didn't think it was a big deal since everyone has unlimited data these days. I was furious, especially when I found out the extra charges on my bill were in the hundreds. I demanded he pay for it, but he just shrugged and said he couldn't afford it right now. I immediately changed the password and set up stronger security, but I'm still stuck with the bill. Now, every time I see Mr. Jenkins, I can't help but feel taken advantage of. My neighbor used my backyard for a party without permission. Last weekend, I decided to visit my parents out of town. Before leaving, I made sure to lock everything up and even told my neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, that I'd be gone for a few days. She's always been friendly, so I didn't think much of it. When I got back on Sunday evening, my backyard looked like a disaster zone. Empty beer bottles, food wrappers, and even a broken chair. Confused, I asked Mrs. Caldwell if she'd seen anything, and she sheepishly admitted that she borrowed my backyard for her grandson's birthday party because her house was too small. She didn't ask because she figured I wouldn't mind. I was furious but tried to stay calm as I pointed out the damage. She offered a half-hearted apology and said she'd clean up, but she hasn't done anything yet. Now, I'm stuck dealing with the mess and considering putting up a fence to keep this from happening again. My brother took my car without asking and got into an accident. Last month, my younger brother Nick came over to hang out for the weekend. While I was out with friends, I left my car keys on the kitchen counter, thinking nothing of it. When I got back, my car wasn't in the driveway. Panicked, I called Nick, and he admitted that he had borrowed my car to run some errands. He said he didn't think it would be a big deal since I wasn't using it. I was already upset, but things got worse when he told me he'd gotten into a minor accident. He had rear-ended someone at a stoplight. The damage to my car wasn't major, but the bumper was dented, and the repair wasn't going to be cheap. Nick promised to help cover the costs, but I knew he didn't have the money to follow through anytime soon. When I asked why he hadn't just asked to borrow the car, he shrugged and said he didn't think I'd mind. I was furious, not only because of the damage, but because he didn't respect my belongings or my trust. I ended up paying for the repairs myself, and I've made it clear that Nick isn't allowed to use my car again without permission. Our relationship is strained, and I still can't believe he thought it wasn't a big deal. My parents sold my car without telling me. When I left for college, I had to leave my car behind because freshmen weren't allowed to have vehicles on campus. It was my first car, and I'd saved up for years to buy it. My parents agreed to keep it in the garage until I could bring it to school next year, and I trusted them completely. A few weeks into the semester, I casually asked my dad if he'd been starting it every now and then, and he dodged the question saying the car was fine. The next weekend, I came home to visit and went to the garage to check on my car, but it wasn't there. My dad mumbled something about helping out a family friend and told me he'd explain later. After pressing him for details, it finally came out. They had sold my car a month ago, claiming it was just sitting there and that the money would be better used to help with household expenses. I was furious. My mom said it wasn't practical for me to have a car I wasn't using and that I didn't really need it since I lived on campus. Now, I'm back at school, and every time I think about it, I feel like I can't trust them anymore. My sister took over my birthday plans without asking. A few months ago, I started planning my 30th birthday party. I wanted it to be a small gathering with close friends and family. I had already picked out a cozy restaurant, planned the menu, and sent out invitations. My sister Lucy, who loves throwing elaborate parties, offered to help, but I made it clear that I wanted to keep it simple. 2 weeks before the party, I got a notification from a new group chat on social media. To my surprise, Lucy had added dozens of people to it, including distant relatives and friends I hadn't spoken to in years. She had completely reworked my plans, booking a fancy venue and even hiring a DJ, all without asking me. When I confronted her, Lucy brushed it off, saying, "It's your 30th. It should be special." I was furious. She had turned my intimate gathering into a massive event, and I didn't feel comfortable with it. I told her to cancel everything, but she insisted the plans were already set and that everyone was excited to come. I ended up canceling the entire thing and telling everyone the original party was off. Now, I'm planning a quiet dinner with a few friends, and Lucy hasn't apologized. Our relationship has been strained since, and I've decided to handle all future events without her involvement. My cousin tried to turn my baby shower into her engagement party. I was so excited for my baby shower, especially since it was the first big family event I'd hosted since finding out I was pregnant. The decorations were beautiful, and everyone seemed to be having a great time until my cousin Megan showed up with her boyfriend. They were late, and Megan was dressed in a gown that looked like she was attending a gala, not a baby shower. Things got strange when Megan kept pulling my mom and a few other relatives aside, whispering with a huge smile on her face. I didn't think much of it until during the gift opening. She loudly interrupted and said, "We have an announcement too." I froze, completely caught off guard. Then, her boyfriend stood up, pulled out a ring, and proposed to her right in the middle of my baby shower. Everyone cheered while I just sat there in shock, surrounded by unopened presents. Megan, of course, accepted, and suddenly the attention was all on them. They popped champagne and toasted to their future, as if my shower didn't even matter anymore. By the end of the party, no one remembered it was my baby shower at all. They were all talking about Megan's engagement. My cousin took over my grandparents' house. After my grandparents passed away, their house was supposed to be sold, and the proceeds split among the family. My cousin Jenna, who was always close to them, asked if she could stay there temporarily until she found a place of her own. We all agreed, thinking it would be just a few months, but months turned into a year, and Jenna still hadn't moved out. We started getting concerned when she began making changes to the house. She painted the walls, replaced the furniture, and even installed a new kitchen. When I asked her about it, Jenna claimed she was upgrading the place to make it more valuable when we eventually sold it. But when I spoke to the rest of the family, it became clear that Jenna had no intention of leaving. I suggested we formally put the house on the market, but Jenna became defensive, saying she'd put too much work into it to just give it up. She then mentioned that she was thinking of buying the house herself, though she hadn't made any official offer. Now, the family is divided, and the house still hasn't been sold. Jenna continues to live there rent-free. My roommate threw away my belongings without asking. A few weeks ago, my roommate, Zoe, decided to do some spring cleaning around the apartment. I didn't think much of it since we'd been meaning to organize for a while. One afternoon, I came home from work to find that several boxes of my stuff were gone from the closet. Old books, clothes, and some sentimental items I hadn't sorted through yet. When I asked Zoe where my things were, she casually mentioned she had thrown them out. I was shocked. I hadn't even gone through those boxes, and some of the things inside were important to me, like letters from my grandparents and a few childhood mementos. Zoe shrugged it off, saying the apartment felt less cluttered without them, and assumed I wouldn't care since I hadn't touched them in months. I was furious. I demanded to know why she didn't ask me first, but she just said she thought she was helping. I tried checking the dumpsters, but it was too late. Everything had already been picked up. Zoe apologized half-heartedly, but didn't seem to understand the damage she'd done. Since then, I've been keeping my things packed away and out of her reach, and I'm seriously considering moving out. The trust between us is broken, and I've learned to be more protective of my belongings. My mom's boyfriend brought his ex to my birthday dinner. For my 21st birthday, I wanted something small, just close family and a few friends. My mom offered to host a dinner at a nice restaurant, and everything seemed perfect. When I arrived, I saw my mom sitting with her new boyfriend Greg and a woman I didn't recognize. At first, I assumed she was a friend of his, but then Greg introduced her as his ex-wife, Karen. I was stunned. Who brings their ex to someone else's birthday? Greg acted like it was no big deal, even joking about how it's all in the past. Throughout dinner, Greg and Karen kept talking to each other like the rest of us didn't exist, sharing stories about their time together. My mom tried to stay cheerful, but it was obvious she was uncomfortable. Karen even made a toast, awkwardly congratulating me on becoming an adult, while mentioning how she and Greg had celebrated their anniversary in the same restaurant years ago. By the time dessert came, I couldn't take it anymore. My friends and I left early, and my birthday dinner ended with my mom apologizing to me in the parking lot while Greg and Karen stayed behind. My friend used my name to get out of trouble. A couple of weeks ago, I got a call from my friend's boss, asking why I hadn't shown up for work. This confused me because I don't even work there. When I asked what was going on, my friend Sam admitted that he had used my name as an excuse to skip work. Apparently, he told his boss that he had to help me with an emergency and that I'd needed him all day. I was shocked and angry. Not only did he lie to his boss, but he dragged me into it without even asking. I asked Sam why he didn't just tell the truth, and he laughed it off, saying it was no big deal and that he didn't think I'd mind. He even suggested that I should be flattered he thought of me first. The next day, his boss called again, asking for more details about the emergency. I had to awkwardly cover for Sam because I didn't want to get him in trouble, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. Sam acted like nothing happened, but I've been avoiding him since. I realized I can't trust him the way I used to, and our friendship hasn't been the same. My brother brought his girlfriend to Christmas without telling anyone. Christmas at my parents' house is always a big family tradition, and this year was no different. We'd planned everything weeks in advance, and everyone knew what to expect. But when my brother Ryan showed up, he wasn't alone. He brought his new girlfriend, Katie, without telling anyone beforehand. We'd never even heard of her until that moment. My mom, always the gracious host, quickly set an extra place at the table, but the surprise threw off the entire day. Katie was polite but seemed uncomfortable, especially since Ryan hadn't prepared her for our family's traditions. She sat through the entire meal quietly, unsure of what to say as we shared stories and inside jokes. To make things worse, Ryan acted like it was no big deal, brushing off our parents' questions about why he hadn't mentioned her. When it was time to exchange gifts, it got awkward. We all had something for each other, but obviously no one had anything for Katie. She looked embarrassed, and my mom, trying to smooth things over, handed her a box of chocolates that had been meant for a neighbor. By the end of the night, Katie barely spoke, and my parents weren't happy with Ryan for blindsiding them. We haven't seen her at any family events since. My friend left me stranded after prom. Prom night was supposed to be one of the best nights of my life. My friend Katie and I planned everything together: matching dresses, a limo, and an after party at her cousin's house. We were both so excited, but halfway through the night, Katie started flirting with a guy she liked. I didn't mind at first, thinking it was just harmless fun, but as the night went on, she spent more and more time with him, leaving me to fend for myself. When the prom ended, I couldn't find Katie anywhere. I texted and called, but there was no response. After an hour of searching, I got a text from her saying she had left with the guy and that I should find another way home. I was stunned. The limo was gone, and I was stuck outside the venue in my prom dress, with no ride and no idea what to do. I ended up calling my mom, who was not happy about having to pick me up at 2 a.m. The next day, Katie acted like nothing had happened, laughing it off as if ditching me was no big deal. I haven't spoken to her since, and I've learned the hard way who my real friends are. My neighbor used my lawnmower without asking. A few days ago, I noticed my lawnmower was missing from the shed. I asked my neighbor, Tom, if he had seen it, and he casually admitted he borrowed it to cut his grass. He said he didn't think I'd mind since I wasn't using it. When he returned it later that day, the mower's blades were dull, and the gas tank was empty. I had to fix it up myself, and since then, I've been locking my shed. Tom hasn't asked to borrow anything since. My stepmom gave my graduation speech without telling me. Graduation was supposed to be my big moment. I'd been chosen to give the student speech after working hard all 4 years of high school. A few days before the ceremony, my stepmom, Laura, casually mentioned how excited she was for my speech, but something about the way she said it bothered me. She'd always been a bit controlling, but I never imagined what would happen next. The day of the ceremony, I arrived early, ready to give my speech. As I was getting seated, I overheard my stepmom talking to one of the school administrators, going over the speech as if it were hers. Confused, I approached her, and she told me there had been a change of plans and that she would be reading the speech instead. Apparently, she had convinced the school that I was too nervous and that she would deliver it better. I was furious, but had no time to argue before the ceremony began. Laura took the stage, reading my words as if they were hers, pausing for applause and acting as though she had written the entire thing. I sat there, humiliated, as she took credit for my achievement in front of all my classmates and teachers. Afterward, my dad didn't see the issue, and Laura just brushed it off, saying she helped me out. My friend used my credit card for a vacation without telling me. Last month, my best friend Katie and I were talking about planning a vacation together. We browsed different destinations, looked at flights, and shared ideas. I told her I wasn't ready to book anything yet since I needed to save up, but Katie seemed eager to go right away. A few days later, I checked my credit card statement and noticed several large charges I didn't recognize: flights, hotel bookings, and even a car rental. Shocked, I realized Katie had used my card to book her vacation. I immediately called her, and she casually admitted she had used my card because she figured we were going anyway and assumed I wouldn't mind paying up front. I was furious. Not only had she used my card without asking, but I hadn't even agreed to the trip yet. When I told her she needed to pay me back immediately, Katie brushed it off, saying she'd get to it when she had the money. Weeks passed, and I still hadn't seen a dime. I ended up having to dispute the charges with my credit card company, cancel the bookings, and change all my passwords. Since then, I've stopped sharing any financial details with Katie, and our friendship has been awkward. I can't believe she thought it was okay to make such a huge decision without consulting me first. My coworker stole my idea and got promoted. A few months ago, our boss asked the team for ideas on how to improve the company's website. I'd been working on a detailed plan for weeks. Redesigns, user experience upgrades, everything. I stayed late at the office, tweaking every detail before presenting it to the team. That's when I made the mistake of sharing my idea with Peter, my coworker, thinking we could collaborate. The next day at our team meeting, Peter presented a plan almost identical to mine, down to the smallest details. My jaw dropped as I watched him get praised for his idea. He even had the nerve to make eye contact with me and smile. I didn't say anything at the time, thinking maybe it was a misunderstanding. But when the boss immediately offered Peter a promotion for his initiative, I knew I'd been betrayed. I confronted Peter after the meeting, and he just shrugged, saying, "You should have presented it first." He even had the audacity to thank me for the inspiration. Since then, Peter has been promoted, and I'm still stuck at the same desk watching him take credit for work that was mine. Now, I'm looking for a new job, and Peter is giving input on hiring new staff. My sister borrowed my bike without asking and returned it damaged. Last week, my sister Emma asked if she could borrow my bike to run some errands. I had plans to use it later, so I told her I'd rather she didn't. A couple of hours later, I noticed the bike was missing from the garage. When I texted her, she admitted she had taken it, claiming she really needed it and thought it wouldn't be a big deal. Later that evening, when she brought it back, I immediately saw the damage. The back tire was flat and there were scratches all over the frame. I asked her what happened, and she shrugged, saying she might have hit a curb too hard but didn't think it was that bad. She apologized but didn't offer to fix it or pay for repairs. I was frustrated. Not only had she borrowed it without asking, but now I was stuck dealing with the repairs. When I told her she needed to cover the costs, she brushed it off, saying she didn't have the money and would help out later. I ended up paying for the repairs myself and decided to keep my bike locked up from now on. Things between us have been tense ever since, and I'm not sure I'll ever let her borrow anything again. My friend used my headphones and broke them. A few days ago, I couldn't find my headphones, and when I asked my friend Ben, he admitted he had borrowed them for a gym session. He didn't ask beforehand, but figured it wouldn't be a big deal. When he returned them, one of the earbuds was completely broken. I asked Ben what happened, and he said he wasn't sure, but didn't offer to replace them. Now, I'm stuck with broken headphones, and I've decided not to lend him anything again. My mom canceled my birthday party because of my stepdad. I was excited for my 18th birthday party. My mom had promised me a big celebration with all my friends. We planned it for months, decorations, catering, and even a DJ. But the week before the party, my mom started acting weird, and my stepdad Mike kept making comments about how expensive it was all getting. A few days before the party, Mike sat us down and announced that the party was off. He said it was unnecessary to spend so much money on a party when they were saving for a new car. I was furious, but my mom just sat there, agreeing with him like she hadn't been the one planning the whole thing with me. I begged them to reconsider, offering to pay for some of it with my savings, but Mike said it wasn't about the money. It was about priorities. On the day of my birthday, instead of a party, Mike took us out to a cheap dinner. My friends were confused when I told them the party was canceled, and some of them even thought I was joking. I sat through dinner watching Mike laugh and joke while my mom barely said a word. In the end, I spent my 18th birthday eating fast food and trying to pretend I wasn't disappointed. My friend's husband announced his promotion at my birthday party. For my 30th birthday, I planned a small dinner with close friends and family. It was supposed to be a quiet evening to celebrate with the people who meant the most to me. Everything started out perfectly. We gathered at my favorite restaurant, and the mood was light and fun. But just after the appetizers arrived, my friend Michelle's husband, Tom, stood up and clinked his glass for attention. At first, I thought he was about to give a toast for my birthday, but instead, he launched into a speech about his recent promotion at work. He talked about how hard he had worked to get there, all the sacrifices he had made, and how this new role was going to change everything for him and Michelle. Everyone clapped, congratulating him, while I sat there, unsure of what to say. For the rest of the evening, the conversation revolved around Tom's promotion. People asked him questions, offered their own congratulations, and the focus completely shifted away from my birthday. Even when the cake came out, Tom was still talking about his big plans for the future. By the end of the night, I felt like my birthday had been completely overshadowed, and now, whenever people mention that dinner, they always bring up Tom's promotion. My sister lied about my finances to get my inheritance. When our grandmother passed away last year, she left a significant inheritance for my sister Emily and me. The will stated we'd each receive an equal share, but Emily seemed to think she deserved more. A few days before the will was finalized, I received a strange call from my aunt, asking if everything was okay with my finances. Confused, I asked why, and she told me Emily had mentioned I was in massive debt and struggling to pay my bills. I was stunned because it wasn't true. Turns out Emily had been telling the entire family that I was in financial trouble and suggested that I shouldn't receive my full share of the inheritance because I'd just waste it. She even told them I was thinking of selling my car to cover rent, which was a complete lie. By the time I found out, half the family believed her. When I confronted her, she acted innocent, claiming she was just worried about me and trying to help. But the real kicker came when the family lawyer called to say Emily had requested to have the will altered so she could manage my half until I was more responsible. Now, the will has been settled as originally intended, but I haven't spoken to Emily since.